Always.
Always number one.
Janusz is number one in my book all the time.
Mazel tov, Rabbi Greene.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, let's make some announcements. Learning announcements. A year of learning sponsored by Julia and Boris Kagan to commemorate the year of Julia's father, Yisuf Ben Matel, and a month of learning sponsored by Annette and Jerry Franson to commemorate the year of Manette's parents, Kenya, Rosa Zimmer, Greene Abad, Leah Paris, and Yosef Ben Sarah Pesach. And don't forget, on Wednesday, we're having a bagels and lox breakfast. If you'd like to join us, please make a reservation. Today is the last time to do that.
Okay, good morning. Happy Monday.
Good morning. Good morning.
In the Kriyas HaTorah this past Shabbos, we're talking about Bilam, and there's a very, I guess, disturbing scene described when he's riding along on his donkey, and the donkey sees the malach in the path, and he stops. And Bilam does not yet see the malach in the path, and he beats the donkey, he hits it. Till finally Hashem opens up his eyes to see why the donkey stopped. And there's the whole dialogue between the donkey and Bilam, which is a separate discussion. We all know that there are many talking jackasses in the world, but that's a separate discussion. We'll leave that for some other time. But the whole notion of hitting the donkey, people should jump on that and say, Sar Balei Chayim. How do you treat an animal? You don't beat an animal. I mean, you can nudge an animal along. You can give it a little tap to make him move faster if he's riding a horse or something like that. But to beat an animal, and this is not usually the source that is quoted for the concept of not being cruel to animals. The most achronim, most sources, quote the pasuk, V'rachamov al kol ma'asav. You say it every day in davening. That Hashem's mercy should extend to all of his creatures, and we have to emulate Hashem, and therefore we should also have mercy on his creatures and treat them kindly. For a separate discussion at a different time, the whole idea of having a pet is a very complicated sugya, because at one time, when people lived on farms, they had guard dogs, they had farm animals, and that treat their animals a certain way. But now we don't live on farms. Is it appropriate to, in an urban setting, to have pets, dogs, for example, who need exercise, and they're kept in an apartment all day long? You go out to walk the dog to take care of his needs, but then it goes back to cooped up to the apartment or the house. If there's a big backyard, the dog can run around, that's one thing. But people who live in the city, they go to work all day long and they come back and the dog is left in the apartment all day. It's very questionable whether or not this is appropriate halachically to have pets. That's a separate discussion. The discussion in the Torah, however, talks about a situation where a donkey is weighed down by a heavy load. And the Torah says, if you see a donkey that is struggling because the load is too heavy for it to carry, you have to help that animal. Now, is discussion whether you help with the animal or you help with the owner of the donkey is a separate discussion. But basically, there are two parts to helping this animal that is overburdened. There's prika and te'ina. There's a whole discussion in the Gemara. To loading and unloading. In other words, if the animal can hardly stand because the weight is too heavy, so you take off some of the material of the load to ease the burden. When you're loading an animal, you have to be careful not to put too much of a burden on the animal. But there's a whole discussion of loading and unloading. And the discussion revolves around the notion of tsar balei chayim. The amount that you're giving this donkey to carry, if it's too heavy, then it's causing pain and discomfort to the animal, and it's halachically prohibited. again, the machlokas, the Gemara, whether the prika, te'ina, the loading or unloading, but the concept is there. If the animal is struggling, you have to ease the burden of the animal one way or the other, either loading or unloading. Now, number one. The second machlokas among poskim and rishonim is whether this mitzvah of tsar balei chayim, whatever category you want to put it under, is it a biblical, is it doraisa, or merely rabbinic, rabbanon? And they're all over the place on this. In terms of different types of suffering, if the suffering is minor, then maybe tsar balei chayim is only the rabbanon. That's the Nemukei Yosef. If its suffering is great, then tsar balei chayim is doraisa. So that's bringing a very fine tuning to it. The Rambam, very unique position. The Rambam says the mitzvah of prika and te'ina, of loading and unloading the donkey, is really from the vantage point of helping the owner of the donkey, not the donkey itself. Which is why it says to help the donkey, the owner of the donkey, even if he's your enemy. That's what the Torah says. So, and there are, again, he doesn't mention anything about helping the animal because the animal might be suffering. It's based on helping the person whose animal is carrying this burden. That's the Rambam in Mishnah Torah, in his halakhic work, where he doesn't see this as tsar balei chayim. In Moran Nevuchim, however, he does say that he's unique in quoting the story of Bilam, and he says that's the source of tsar balei chayim. But in his philosophical work, not in his halakhic work. And he talks about many halachos that talk about compassion for creatures. For example, shchita, if it's done properly, is a compassionate way of killing an animal. Shiluach hakan, sending the mother bird away, taking the eggs. Other things, you can't slaughter a cow and its calf on the same day, or the mother and the cow on the same day. That's also considered tsar balei chayim. So the Rambam has two different positions, one in halakhic and one in philosophical works. The Ramban,
By Shiluach hakan, it says that if you're on the road and you see the nest and you want the eggs, you should send the bird away.
Yeah.
But what they do today, where they repeatedly send the bird away just to be mekayim the mitzvah, I think that's tsar balei chayim.
It might be. But again, not everybody has the opportunity to do this mitzvah. So some people take it to an extreme. You're right. It's problematic. There are a lot of issues with the way some people try to observe certain mitzvahs. And the Ramban says it's got nothing to do with compassion because compassion doesn't apply to creatures. It applies to people. So that's a unique position. Again, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, a contemporary writer, 20th century, says that he doesn't understand why the Rambam derives the source from Bilam and not from Prika and Te'ina, which seem to be more logical. And again, you get to a discussion of whether it's you're helping the donkey or you're helping the owner of the donkey. The most brilliant observation that I've seen about the machlokas in terms of the nature of the mitzvah of tsar balei chayim, whether it's the Raisa, Rabbona, what posuk you derive it from, Rav Osher Weiss, contemporary posek in Yerushalayim. Brilliant analysis, and he says it's not a specific mitzvah, but it's a value. The Ratzon HaTorah is to treat the creatures properly. It's a value that, I guess it's a meta concept that underrides the entire discussion. Now, subsection of tsar balei chayim. We know we accept it as grant, whether it's Darais, Rabbanon, separate discussion, but we know we can't cause harm to creatures. Is there an exception? For example, if there's a greater good, a greater need, can you cause harm to a creature if it helps a human being. If there's a benefit to people, can you cause discomfort to an animal? So, and we'll get at that because that discussion is very, very relevant when it comes to experimentation on animals, using them as literally guinea pigs before they. There are certain animals that are very similar to human beings, certain organs, and they do terrible things to animals to experiment on them before they experiment on human beings. For example, I had a neighbor on Fairhaven Avenue. He was a vice president of a very, very big pharmaceutical company that used to do experimentation of their new drugs on the eyes of rabbits, because the eyes of rabbits are very similar to the eyes of people. And I remember they picketed his house on Fairhaven Avenue a few times. How do you do experimentation on these harmless, beautiful rabbits? He moved, but that's advisable. But can you cause pain or discomfort or suffering to animals if there is a quote unquote greater good? What's that?
Killing an animal for its skin.
We'll get to that. We will get to that. We'll get to that as well. I mean, in Parshas Noach, after the Mabul, man was given the permission to eat meat. So obviously, if there's a human need, humans are at a higher level than animals, and therefore the animal's welfare is secondary to the human's need or desire, shall we say. So eating meat, shechita, is allowed, but shechita is done in the most humane way possible. Again, killing is killing. But if you've been to a slaughterhouse, both Jewish and non-Jewish, you'd be amazed at the difference. In a non-Jewish slaughterhouse, they kill animals in the most barbaric way. They'll stun them, they'll give them an electric prod, they'll bop them on the head, they'll kill them in the most barbarous ways. Shechita is still killing, but shechita takes place in an instant. The animal loses consciousness, it doesn't feel pain. Again, you're killing an animal, but it's for a greater good, meaning to serve humanity. You could argue that we're better off being vegetarians. That's a separate discussion. Yes, David.
Yeah, all throughout history, Jews have been brought up on shechita and related to that. Milah. Jews should not be saying that it's the most humane way to do shechita because that only opens the Pandora's box. They should say, you're right, but this is how we're commanded to slaughter an animal. If it's a religious thing, case closed. That's what they should do. By saying it's the most humane way, then they open up the Pandora's box to maybe there's a more humane method, and then we're in trouble.
It's a valid point, which is why many great rabbis were vegetarians. Rav Kook, among others.
What would they do in the time of Mashiach?
It's an interesting question. In the time of Mashiach, that they probably have to, they can eat the Lev Yosef. Instead of the Shara Bor. Well, they can create an animal out from Sefer Yetzirah. So clearly, the Achronim discuss the question where there's a human need, then when human benefit supersedes Tsar Baalei Chayim, put it that way. However, you can quote all different Achronim, they all agree on that. However, and the Ramah, where is it? His language is important. Ramah says, Kol dover hatzarech l'refuah or l'shar dvarim, anything that you need an animal for a cure or for other thing for a human need, les bei mishum isur tsar baalei chayim. Tsar baalei chayim doesn't apply. V'chein mutar, and it's permissible, for example, to pull feathers off a goose for pillows or blankets or what have you. And we're not worried about Tsar Baalei Chayim, even though the animal does suffer. Umikol makom ha'olam nimnoim dahavi achzorius. But Jewish people are very careful about causing distress to animals. So, are you allowed to pull feathers off a goose? Yes. Should you do it? Probably not. That's the Ramos's rig. Ramosha Feinstein, in one of his chuvas, says very clearly that even though human benefit trumps tsar ba'alei chayim, you may not act cruelly to an animal. So, for example, bullfighting. To watch a bullfighting is prohibited very clearly because animals are at the end, they're tortured pretty much. Going to a rodeo might also fall into that same category because in order to get those broncos and bulls to jump up and down, they tie belts around their testicles very, very tight to cause them pain, and they're jumping and riding to get out of it. That's how that's the entertainment value of it, to see how long you can stay on before the animal throws you off. That's also prohibited. Going to circuses is a separate issue. Aside from being Moshe Leitzim, according to some Mefarshim, people of the animal rights groups will always complain that in circuses they don't treat the animals properly, which would seem to be counterintuitive because you need these animals to perform, and you think you would treat them kindly. Otherwise, why would they? But that's a separate discussion, which is an ongoing thing. Yeah.
You talked about, you said human benefit trumps tsar ba'alei chayim. But going back to Rabbi Abe's term of opening the Pandora's box, human benefit, that's debatable. It's like something that it can be beneficial, but does that person really need it? Is it necessary?
Okay, so let's focus on the major contemporary issue that we're dealing with today is medicine, development of medicines for people. And before medicine is approved, it has to go through a rigorous process of testing, and that testing involves animal experimentation. Already back in the 18th century, Shvus Yaakov was asked, is it permissible to experiment on animals in order to help human people in certain afflictions? And he says, again, he rules that it's permissible. Others say, again, it's permissible, but avoid cruelty whenever possible. Again, other achronim talk about it. Well, interesting, Yaakov Yechiel Weinberg, the 20th century Holocaust survivor, wrote that when you're dealing with healing people, he introduces the notion of kavod hatzibur, that it's for the benefit of society in general. He adds that in. But we should not be machmir in terms of expense to the public. Again, one still has to be very careful in how you do it. And again, certain experiments on animals are very painful to the animals. And it's hard to avoid this type of cruelty. And it's a serious issue. Rav Eliezer Waldenberg, great medical posek, died in 2006. He says that you try to take the measures as much as possible to ensure that the animals don't suffer unnecessarily, such as using sedation. There are painful things that animals suffer in order to do experiments on them, but they could also do it with sedation. Now, sedation is an extra step; it's an extra expense, but it could alleviate the issues of tsar ba'alei chayim. Yeah.
A lot of people's problems with with animal experimentation is misplaced ideas. For example, if you're in a position where you have somebody who needs an organ transplant in your family, God forbid, you would be thankful that this was tried on countless dogs and sheep.
Yes. Okay.
A lot of it is misplaced ideation that it's we have to be kind. That we have to prioritize human beings. A lot of people don't prioritize human beings.
Okay, we do have to prioritize human beings. However, as many of the Achronim point out, the usage of animal experimentation in order to get those cures should be done in a way that causes the least amount of pain to the animals.
Most of the time, it is.
I'm not so, again, I'm not so sure, because it's an extra step, it's an extra cost, both in labor and in material, and the pharmaceutical companies are in business to make money. And if animals suffer, it's only an animal. It's a very interesting, flexible value in terms of the need supersedes Tsar Baalei Chayim, but you can mediate that need by doing it in a way that's a little bit more compassionate. That would be the ideal halachic situation. The last topic. If you have a pet, and having pets by itself is a separate issue, but if you have a pet that is suffering, is very ill, and many people who have animals, dogs, for example, for many, many years, but after a while, the dog develops a lot of human diseases, and it becomes very expensive taking the dog to the veterinarian all the time to deal with the osteoporosis and deal with the vision problems, all kinds of issues that dogs have, just like people have. And at some point, the animal is suffering. Is it okay to euthanize that animal, to put it down? It's an interesting question. Again, Rachamov al kol ma'asav teaches us to alleviate pain. And again, there are those who are of the opinion that Rachamov al kol ma'asav might apply to animals who are suffering from a sickness or illness. If the overall suffering of remaining alive is greater than the suffering involving killing the animal, euthanizing the animal, then perhaps it might be permissible. It's a very gray area. Taking a life under any circumstance, whether it's human life for sure, but even an animal life. Man doesn't give life, man shouldn't take life. However, if an animal is really, really suffering, it might be permissible, according to some authorities, to put the animal down. It's not something that we like to talk about, which brings us back to the whole subject in general of having pets. I will say, now, there are service animals that are necessary for some people, but other people just want companionship, and the animal is not given the exercise that it needs and the companionship that the animal needs, but being around other animals, it's very questionable whether having pets, the way people have pets in society today, is a value that is viewed positively by the halacha. It might not be so simple. We're no longer living on a farm. We no longer need guard dogs. We no longer have farm animals to help plow the fields. In previous years, many times the animals lived in the house with the people because it was cold outside. So they took the dogs and the horses and the cows inside, and all whatever. But today we don't live under those circumstances, and just having a pet, unless you need the pet, as I said, if it's a service animal, if you're blind, you're seeing eye dog, if you're shut in and you need companionship. But again, dogs require, and cats, especially dogs, require exercise. And if the dog sits at home all day long, except for a few minutes when it goes to the curb, that's also Tsar Baalei Chayim in a certain regard. So it's a fascinating topic. The whole notion that V'rachamov al kol ma'asav, God's mercy extends to all of his creatures, and we have to imitate the way of God. And therefore, if we have anything to do with animals, we should try to do it in the most compassionate way possible. Questions, comments, critiques? Yes.
What about Matzah? Learn about how a machine made Shiur.
Yes.
Right? I would think today's time, right? Could have an automated process where they could do the screener on an animal without having to show it. So why would that be visible? First of all, the price of meat definitely come down because the amount of animals that can be shepherded today far greater than the human.
I don't, again, having observed the Shkita process up close, personal, and by the way, when you go to a slaughterhouse, you have to wear a raincoat because the blood is all over the place. Many people, after they visit a slaughterhouse, don't eat meat for a while. But I don't know how, I don't know if it's possible because it's a, you have, I'm not sure, because every animal is different. Not every animal is a cookie cutter shape and size. And the shochet has to know exactly where to cut. I don't know if it's possible. I don't know. Also, you're dealing with a biblical pasuk. V'zavachta kasher tzivisicha. You have to be the one that has to shecht, according to the halachas of shechita. So I don't know if you can include a machine in that. Interesting question. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I haven't looked into it. If this has been discussed in the literature, whether you have a machine slaughtering animals, I can imagine somebody must have talked about it at some point. But I think shechita requires human agency because aside from the actual shechita itself, the knife has to be examined quite frequently. And again, the examination of the knife could be done with a machine, but there are too many moving parts. There are too many moving parts for shechita to be done by. Interesting question. If I can have time, I'll look that up as a topic. That's a very fascinating question. Can you have machine shechita? Interesting. Like you have machine matzahs, can you have machine shechita? I would think not, but I'll have to look into it. I'm sure somebody has raised that question. Yes.
So how would the machine do that?
They have someone.
Well, somebody,
Has to turn it on.
the same way that somebody makes a bracha before they turn on the machine for machine matzahs, which is why I personally don't like machine matzahs, because the machine is not a person.
But they're a lot less expensive than the regular store. So
You can't put a price on mitzvahs. I mean, that's my personal opinion.
today's time, there are people.
Yeah, I understand, and that's why they allow machine, but they allow machine matzah only because it gets to more people, and it's more convenient and it's cheaper. But if you're being behind the mitzvah, the hidura, the proper way, machine matzah is quite problematic. Yeah, okay, but that makes it difficult for most people to do that. I know people who did that. Okay. Be kind to animals. That's the bottom line. Okay. Have a great day.
Tell me about the time. I try to avoid it. I get a squirrel. And I look back and I look on the street. It backed up over there. Because it was squirrel.
Yeah, it was squirming. So yeah, absolutely.
I had no choice.
Absolutely.
You're on it, with Rabbi Marcus, right?
Yeah.
Sign of a.
Yishem Adonai Baruch Me'atov Yad Olam. Baruch Shechal Mishlot V'chayinu. Okay.